restore, renew, reconnect, live, laugh, and love, connections, dream, getaway experiences. Brave Heart Workshops, unique getaways live with Jill Reynolds.
The Connection Show, renew, restore, and reconnecting community, sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today is Spencer Thompson from Canada. Welcome to the show, Spencer.
Thank you, Jill.
We're so glad you could join us, and I'd love the audience to know a little bit about Spencer. Spencer Thomas is a self-leadership coach in the Greater Toronto area. Spencer was drifting through life as a dissatisfied and disconnected small business owner, working too hard for too little and missing out on a well-rounded lifestyle. Finally, he began to learn how to connect with his needs and goals, molded his business to fulfill rather than deplete, and began developing the specific skills and experiences to assist others in making similar discoveries and transformations. Spencer has trained and practiced with the Internal Family Systems IFS model, which is at the core of his work with coaching, mentoring, and group facilitation. He is also an enthusiastic experimenter in group dynamics, developing and hosting events and conversations to utilize IFS concepts in building connection and community with others. So what a wonderful bio and transition in your life, Spencer. So thank you so much for sharing that bio with us.
Yeah, thanks. It was interesting to hear you read that. It just kind of, I guess we'll get into this later, but I could definitely feel parts like reacting, just hearing, I guess, like a validation or just that kind of reflection from you.
Yeah. Well, what I'd love the audience to know is a little bit about that journey in your life, if you would be transparent and take us down that path of your life, of what led you into the business you were in before, the small business, and then what was stirring inside of you that took you into this new direction, if you can share that with the audience.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, like what led me there. And the truth is, I wasn't led there. I just I was living life in a way of kind of falling into things or backing into things, or this is kind of an experience that a lot of people who procrastinate, I think, fall into, is like you start out with 1,000 options and then a week later it's 500 and 2 weeks later you're down to like 100. And if you procrastinate long enough, the time makes up the choice for you and you just kind of accept it and you just are kind of like a rock bouncing downhill. And so that's kind of the way I was going in life, and not consciously, I wasn't really ready to accept that that's how things were going, but definitely it was starting to become apparent over time that, it just wasn't the way to set a plan for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about leading up to this. So in your life, you said you were a small business owner. What type of small business did you own previous to the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I still do own, and I kind of have both things going with the coaching, and but I started with a landscaping company in like 2005,
Mm-hmm.
and owned that for a long time. Wasn't very satisfied with my lifestyle and my feeling about it, but there's little bits and pieces there. Like I really enjoy being outside, and I enjoy the creativity, which is like a connection to self when you're in that mode. I just wasn't getting enough of it to find fulfillment. But in the last several years, I've kind of learned how to transition and just create more and more space for that side of the business and cut out all the stuff that was just draining and depleting, and really didn't feel like I was choosing it so much as I was anxious or afraid if I didn't accept it.
So one of the things that you had mentioned with your bio is that you began to connect with your needs and your goals. So what was life like for you before connecting?
Kind of just like that stereotype image of someone who goes to work, comes home, plops down on the couch, watches TV and eats, and kind of goes to bed and starts the next morning again. It was really just kind of, unremarkable.
Kind of like Groundhog's Day, huh?
Well, yeah, it did have some aspects of that for sure.
Bill Murray and Groundhog's Day, the same thing over and over again.
Right.
So how did you get to a place then where you started to, was there something in your life that helped you to start connecting? Or did something hit in your life, or did you find IFS and then you started to connect? What came first, IFS or starting to connect first?
Yeah, the connecting came first, and I had kind of heard a little bit about parts work along the way, but not IFS, and nothing really fleshed out. But really, I was really interested in politics for a long time. But, again, it was kind of this thing where it was like tense and, conflicting with people, and it wasn't really enjoyable. I have always had that kind of competitive spirit, which the last couple of years I've been learning how to kind of step back from that and be more relaxed. But so I did get that kind of joy out of that lifestyle and that interest. But I kind of just started shifting more toward philosophy and away from politics. And then you come into questions like how to live a better life, morals and virtues, and different things that kind of expand your mind. Unlike politics, where it kind of feels like you're chasing the rabbit or the whack-a-mole, like this is in the news and this is in the news, and you're always chasing. And philosophy let me slow down, let me get a little more centered on like original thought and original feeling. And then once you start to think more about like quality of life, virtue, ethics, that sort of thing, it opens things up for you to go into self-knowledge and psychology and that sort of thing. And so speaking of IFS, I know a lot of people come from more of like a spiritual background in the IFS community, and I came from the complete opposite realm. I'm like just strictly philosophical, rigid thinking, but so it was a little difficult to kind of open up to the IFS way, but over time, that's how it worked out for me.
And so how did you get and before we keep saying IFS, how did you get introduced to internal family systems? And then that number one, and then if you could express, because the audience probably doesn't even know what internal family systems is, and they don't even know what we're talking about. So how did you find and discover the modality of therapy called internal family systems, and then go from there?
Yeah, well, I think for about the last 5 to 10 years, as like the podcasting world exploded, Dick Schwartz started to, take on guest appearances, and he'd just pop up. And if you search, he's the founder of the internal family systems model, for those who don't know. And he would just kind of pop up, and I'd hear an interview, and then next thing you know, like there's a book out that I can get and really learn more about where it comes from and how it works. And I really found it was resonating a lot with how I felt the world made sense and how the mind made sense and experience made sense to me. And it really was like integrating a lot of thoughts that were scattered into like one modality.
Okay, so by finding him on a podcast or social media site, you started to listen to him, you purchased the book, and then started to get curious and inquisitive more on internal family systems, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if you could explain to the audience what is internal family systems, if they don't even know what it means and what is it?
Right. So they refer to it as like a therapy modality. I don't even think of IFS as therapy per se, because it's so like based on attunement that it really doesn't feel like the stereotype of what we think of as therapy in our culture. But the essential principles behind IFS are that we have like a core self, and then we have parts. And one way you could think about that is like, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening rolls around and you get that voice, that impulse that says like, boy, I'd sure like to have a few cookies right now. And then that other voice comes along and says, oh no, you don't. Like, we're not, we're watching our figure, we're watching our weight, we're, watching our sugar, our fat, whatever. And so IFS kind of addresses the way that we have these internal conflicts, like almost like little debates and arguments and power struggles within us. And it just gives us an outline on how to map that out and how to interact with these sub-personalities as they could be thought of, in a way that we can really do a lot of healing and deep work.
So when you discovered internal family systems through the podcast then, and you learned a little bit about it, then did you start to do the work by yourself? Did you go see a professional? How did you then begin this process of connecting with the parts, as you say, and going deeper?
Yeah. So I don't mean to like plug things on your show or anything, but I'll just say what was really great for me was Dick Schwartz has an audiobook called Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts. And it's kind of like half lecture, half teaching about IFS. And then he also guides through meditations and exercises that you can, as you're listening along, you can go along with them. You can interact a bit inside your own head with your own parts and begin that learning and begin that process kind of with like the main guru's voice right there guiding you along. Mm-hmm. But the wonderful thing about IFS is like there's this great community out there, and there's a few pockets in person in some of the cities like Chicago and Boston have them. It's kind of growing around Toronto now. But in the meantime, there's like a pretty substantial and active online community. And I just kind of found people and I started joining some peer groups. And I started having opportunities to kind of share with others and learn from them and really kind of build up that trust and community for myself, which was helpful.
So you personally then did not go to an office to see an internal family systems practitioner to do your own parts work. You listened to this modality, like you said, of Dick's, this online one where you could self lead yourself in the parts work. Is that correct? Am I saying that correct?
That's how I started for the first couple months. And then I started to find a therapist and I worked with her for several months. And yeah, like when in office had the sessions, and that was really productive and helpful as well.
Okay.
And definitely working with a professional is, it gives you extra layers beyond trying to do it yourself.
And when did you start doing that work with the professional? When did that transpire for you, Spencer?
Yeah, that would have been summer, fall of 2018.
Of 2018.
Yeah.
Okay. And then now, so where are you at with your journey with internal family systems now? Is that something that you're utilizing yourself with others, or, take us a little bit further on the work that you're doing now?
Right. So just to skip ahead, I've started with a coaching practice in the last 6 months or so. Been working with some clients and I call myself like self-leadership coach or self-leadership coaching. And the main idea behind that, and this is really true to IFS, is with that core self inside of all of us, we're doing all our own healing with our parts. And so like the therapist or the coach or your peer facilitator or whoever it may be is really helping you, not by guiding and not by psychoanalyzing or anything like that, but just helping you to connect with your own self. And then through that process, you can do your own healing. And so the main focus for me is really just to help people build up the practices and the sense of being able to connect to self and connect to parts and form that relationship there where they can really start to take on more and more for themselves.
And so how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you take them on that journey of beginning then to connect with self?
Yeah, that can be a messy process because everyone's different and everyone's parts are different. Like some people's are literally like images that they have of themselves at different ages. Other people have like very like images of animals and robots, and everyone kind of comes from a different cultural background and just artistic background where different imagery is what they associate to the world and to their parts. And so a lot of it in the early stages is really just helping them build up that awareness and kind of help them distinguish between parts and begin learning how to build a rapport with them, learning when they're in self energy. And then it kind of becomes the point of like, okay, we've gotten all this mess with all these different parts. Now you've learned how to get into self, and now you've learned how to grow that ability for awareness. So now you can kind of slow things down and start over a bit and kind of work with them.
Is that your doggy that wants to say
Yeah.
hi? What's his or her name?
Yeah, that's Toby.
Hey, Toby, you trying to do some parts work with us, Tobe? Well, I think, just to help the audience a little bit, I have like two scenarios that I utilize to explain a little bit about IFS. So I think the one that I would start with is people will think, parts, like, is this like disassociation? Is this like people who have different personality disorders? And it's not. So I look at internal family systems parts kind of like this. I look at it that when a baby is born into the womb, the baby is formed inside that womb. Inside that warm womb, that baby takes on preconceived emotions that can be, oh, I am so excited, the mother, I'm so excited I'm having this baby. I just am nurturing it and can't wait to see it. Or the mother takes on maybe an emotion of, oh my gosh, this was not a planned pregnancy. I'm really not looking forward to this. And so that baby may take on those emotions inside the womb. Mm-hmm. Now you take it a step further, and if the baby's being born vaginally and it's coming down the birth canal, and the OBGYN takes the baby's head and pulls it down that birth canal, and as the baby is being pulled down the birth canal, it may be experiencing some pain in parts. Mm-hmm. It may be experiencing some confused parts, like what is going on? I've been inside this, placenta, this warm thing, and someone's pulling at me. What's going on? And then as that baby comes out of the womb and the doctor might spank it to get a, reaction, the baby is like, wait, someone just hurt me and I'm angry. And then the pediatrician cuts the umbilical cord, and now the baby is disconnected and feels maybe some parts of abandonment. So I like to say that because people might say, I think, I've talked, well, I don't really have any parts that need to be looked at. And so I think that birth story is a really kind of good word picture because we're born into this world with parts that come in. It's not like we're split off. We're not, dysfunctional human beings, but we're born into life with parts of ourselves. And so it's a matter as life goes on, how those parts transform and what they do and how they either protect us, manage our lives, or we push them away or whatever we do with those parts. So that's like my first kind of intro in my brain of parts to explain to people what does parts mean. The other one is if any of you in the audience have ever gone to see or seen on TV the Pixar animated film Inside Out. When Dick Schwartz first saw that, he was mesmerized and says, "Oh my gosh, the producers must be doing parts work," because the whole movie is about parts work. So had you seen that movie, that cartoon yet?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was out a couple years before I started IFS, and I would have seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did see it. You remember seeing it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think that one is the most profound. So for any of you guys have seen that film, I think the easiest way to describe IFS is through that film, because in that film, the little girl is having to move from Minnesota to California because her father gets a promotion. And she's very active on her hockey team. And when they move across the United States from Minnesota to California, and she begins her school and she joins the hockey team, she does not feel like she belongs. She does not feel connected. And so she starts to feel immense sadness, whereas before she felt immense joy. And when she went home to tell her mom that she was so sad and she wanted to move back to Minnesota and she did not want to be living in California, her mother's reaction, which, she probably was just trying to help out, said, "Don't let daddy know you're sad because he's going to feel bad that he moved you away from your friends to this new neighborhood." So thus began the little girl's life of utilizing joy as her manager or protector in her life. And through that, she exiled her sadness and pushed it away. Mm-hmm. And as she pushed it away, the only way she could sustain her daily life is what Dick calls firefighters started to come in, such as anger started to erupt. She'd have outbursts at the dinner table, and she started having different types of emotional parts coming out, disdain, and all these different types of parts that she had really never tapped into before. Mm-hmm. And so the whole film was you watching her little worlds of anger, disdain, or abandonment. Her little worlds were collapsing all around her. And the more they collapsed, the more she was out of touch with her own unique and personal self. So the whole end of the movie is when finally she has a conversation with sadness. And sadness says to joy, or joy says to sadness, "I guess it's okay that I let you come in and have some space." And so sadness comes in and she finally cries and she allows that exiled part to have space. And as soon as she does that, she returns to her original self, which was a joyful little girl. But she had to first find the space for her joy to return. So that's it's like such a profound, if you haven't rented it, do yourself the favor and rent it, because it is a really profound movie, I think.
Yeah, just listening to that, I'm thinking I'm overdue to rewatch it because it's a lot more detail than I had recalled. But
Yeah, there's so
yeah,
much in it. There's so much depth in that, so much depth in it. So take us a little bit then on your own personal, if you feel like being authentic and going deeper. So as you've done this work in your own personal life, Spencer, what types of parts have have self allowed to come into fruition and be seen to the point where you have kind of seen where maybe certain parts may have been your managers in your life?
yeah. And maybe I should just say something about managers since we're using the term. But so in the IFS model, Dick kind of outlined, as you mentioned before, exiled parts and manager parts. And we have these different, some of the parts like exiles hold the pain and the fear and the shame and those sorts of feelings. And then the manager parts are the ones that come in and create strategies to either distract us or kind of prevent us in some way from reaccessing those feelings, which is why maybe, we zone out in front of the TV instead of like think deeply about something that went bad earlier in the day.
Well, the TV can become the manager or the protector
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
keeps us managing and protecting our lives so that we don't have to go further.
Mm-hmm.
But the managers and protectors are very vital parts in. I think the biggest thing is to let the audience know that parts are uniquely beautiful and amazing, and they're not a negative. I think so much therapy, I think, brings you down a journey of a lot of negativity. Certain therapy does,
Mm-hmm.
Sure, we need. I think I wouldn't be alive today if I hadn't had 38 years of therapy. I'd be dead, to be quite honest. So, but I think certain modalities of cognitive therapy keep you stuck, and you
Mm-hmm.
keep going around and around and around in a circle like a hamster on that wheel, and you just don't feel like you're ever going to get off.
Right.
But being able to go into a session of internal family systems, and Dick uses his C words. So maybe you can share with this, I know some of them, you might know all of them, of Dick's C words that he uses that relate to the parts.
Right. I'm sure I'll get to 7 and forget which I said and forget one. But yeah, so when he talks about the core self, and I earlier mentioned like that self energy, it's really just having certain qualities. The ones I mostly think about are calmness, curiosity, compassion, courage. The ones I less often think about but are still really evident and they just show up differently are like creativity, um, confidence, connectedness, and clarity. I think I got them all. But yeah, so it's just that sense of like, for example, with clarity, like, someone's walking down the street and maybe they're in a bad mood from something that happened that day and they have a bit of a scowl on their face. Can you just see that, well, that's a person living their own life. But some people with parts that are used to negative reactions from people or like fear that type of situation might see a scowl and think like, oh no, like what did I do wrong? Or does this person want to harm me? And so like just having that clarity to really separate yourself from those type of reactions is like a big deal.
I'm smiling so much as you shared that because say your predominant ones again. It was calmness,
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah. Calm, curious, and compassionate are like really important as
Those
a
are yours.
facilitator or a practitioner, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the connectedness.
That's funny because when I do my internal family systems works, the one that pops up the most for me is the connection part. Connection and clarity and curiosity are the ones for me. And I think it's because for me personally, I had so much childhood abuse, and I was so disconnected from the abuse that I could talk about it as though I was at a Tupperware party.
Right.
And I've also done some work myself, personal work with Dan Allender's philosophy. He's from the Seattle School of Theology, and he does conferences around the globe called the Story Workshop, where it teaches you how to learn how to tell story. And he does a lot of trauma workshops and sexual healing workshops as well, and marriage. And so I've gone to his trauma one, I've done the story workshop, and I've done the sexual abuse one. And the one thing that Dan says, which I think correlates with Dick Schwartz's approach with internal family systems, is Dan says how imperative it is to be able to get in touch with the small T's and the large T's in our life, which is traumas. And many of us can maybe sometimes take a look at the large T's because they're more evident. Like if someone was raped, it's evident that that was a big T. But many times people who haven't had extraordinary trauma in their life to say I have lots of big T's might be more in that denial part that says trauma has not been a part of my life. Whereas Dan explains that we've all had small T's. And a small T, he said, can be, and he used the story of you were married, you go through a divorce, and that might be a big T, but it's your first Christmas alone without your partner. And you're sitting there feeling extraordinary sadness because it's your first time alone. That might be a small T in your life. So what Dan explains is that it's so important to learn how to get out of a helicopter and land your plane. And what he means by that is to be able to write down in 1,000 words, not 200, not a book, but try to keep it around 1,000 words descriptively of what that small T or large T was like. Mm-hmm. And until I heard that, because I had been doing IFS work and doing my parts work, it's amazing, Spencer, because I did this exercise with my date rape. And I had been doing trauma work, EMDR, IFS. I had been doing that for several years before this incident. So when I sat down to write my 1,000 words and getting out of the helicopter, it is now on my website if anyone wants to go to it. It's under my blogs. It's the story of innocence it is about. And when I wrote it and I read it out loud in my sexual healing group, I was bawling like a baby. And I had said it. I had shared this story to probably 20 therapists over the lifetime because I had been in treatment and I had, talked about it with like no emotional energy around it.
Right.
But when I landed the plane and got descriptive, I literally got descriptive to the point of saying that the hardwood floor and where the couch was located in the house and that it was a patterned flower couch. I mean, I finally could put the memories with it and combine it. So by doing that then, I personally was able then, within a year, to go to one of my own Braveheart workshops with Dr. Laura Wood, who is amazing, an amazing IFS therapist, but she's also trained with somatic. And we did a somatic experience with IFS of having someone in the group play my date rapist and then her like push me down as the rapist. And somatically, I was able to push her off of me and use the words and be able to get the rape out of my body. And it was amazing to release those parts that were still stuck inside of me. They were definitely exhaled parts. Mm-hmm. And so you can do so much with internal family systems for healing. It's just a matter of like how, like you said, how curious you want to get, how creative you want to get, I still have the hard time with the calm. My parts have been activated for so long, so the calm part takes me a lot longer. But I really love how you can. I love the wording connect the dots, connect the dots, connect the dots. And so I can go in my mind's eye and connect those little dots and bring it back to the part of where it came from. And it's very profound.
Yeah.
So share with us now, I know you and I talked before the show. Tell us a little bit about you getting trained now with the internal family SIDS modality and where you're wanting to be, I think it's called a level 1 internal family system practitioner.
Right. Yeah, so I started out kind of more in like client in the books and stuff, doing exercises. And Jay Early is one of the people who wrote one of the most popular books on IFS. And it's kind of written for the layperson and covers all the basics. It's just filled with exercises and examples and things that like pretty much anyone can latch onto and really get some good information from to start their own journey. But he also was doing like courses and stuff, and like a lot of therapists, coaches, and just people interested in their own healing take these courses and they kind of learn some of the basics, and maybe they go deeper and learn more about healing exiles, and then maybe you go even deeper into like the third level and just keep covering like a lot of more advanced topics that don't typically come up for, you know, most lay people. So I did all that, and the IFS Institute's also been opening up a lot more modules and online learning activities and stuff. So I started with those programs, and then the first time around I saw an IFS level 1 training come up, and I was like, I'm gonna do that. And I kind of chickened out a bit. I procrastinated and it filled up, and so I didn't end up going to it. And then a few months later, a few new trainings were posted in again, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna sign up this time. And I did, and I got it in there. And so that's been a good experience. I'm about half the way through that training, and I'll be finished in December. So the level 1 is kind of what the IFS Institute does to kind of put their stamp on a practitioner to show that like they've trained with the actual developers and creators and people who are really doing all the research and development of the model.
And how has that been for you now that because you started, like you said, with more modalities on the internet and reading, and then you said just a few months with a therapist, but now you're in the training. So have you seen a transition in yourself with the models now that you've done different ways to understand the model itself?
Yeah, so this is kind of what I mentioned about liking the experimentation and expanding more to group formats and things. When Jay Early's classes ended, I kind of put the invitation out to my classmates and said, like, let's keep meeting on the same schedule and we'll just practice and, you know, talk about IFS, do IFS. I was in some other peer groups, and then I started another one where I was really doing a lot of experimentation with 3, 4, 5 people, sometimes more at one time in different exercises. And so a lot of my development came before I started the level 1 this summer. But what I really get out of the level 1, aside from just like the official nature of it, is just it is a little uncomfortable and like interesting for me, because it ties in like, you know, the parts that come up for me around like switching professions and making career changes, and like comparing myself to others. There's the social aspects of the training, which unfortunately, like, that didn't really come into play as much as I had thought it would, because we're doing it all online due to COVID this year. But
Yeah. That's
yes,
that's disappointing, I think, because you do sign up and it's the interactive experiential is key.
yeah.
And anybody can say, oh, you can do this and that online. And there's just, to me, there's nothing like real life connection. When you have to do it superficially with just Zooms versus meeting in like people say to me, like, why don't you start doing some Zoom retreats? And I'm like, because mine is called the connection retreats, and I just can't seem to connect at a retreat on Zoom. I can do a Zoom connection gathering tribe, which you've been on my show, which was Wednesday night, and that feels okay. But actually doing, my taglines is connection, dream, and getaway experiences. And so if we can't connect and dream and get away, I just feel like we're missing a big portion of what my business is. And so it is hard to try to see. And so people have asked me, do retreats online? And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. So,
Right.
yeah. So is there anything else that you'd love the audience to know regarding internal family? I would like them to know, like, how we met. So talk a little bit about your Facebook group, because that is open, correct, for anyone? Is that an open group or the internal family systems community?
That's actually not my group. That's run by a woman named Karen Locke, who's like been a really influential community builder. She's been around before me, and she's like trained with Dick in the past and stuff. So, but
what's the name of that Facebook group?
Yeah, people should look up the Compassionate Self-Leadership Community online.
Compassion. But aren't you doing your own like Zoom group?
Yeah,
Are you doing your own Zoom
I host
group?
little events within that group that she's been kind enough to let me post them. And but yeah, actually what I was really interested to get back to and talk about a little bit was you talking about like descriptiveness, and just that, and earlier talking about getting stuck in CBT. And my experience in therapy before IFS was like, here's what I do, or here's what I'm like that I don't like. And then the therapist gives you different ways to, rephrase or reframe that in your head. And for me, I kind of just roll my eyes a bit at that. And I'm like, well, I already know that. Like, I'm a pretty smart guy. Like, I know that. But what IFS really does is it allows you to connect directly to the emotion, directly to like the somatic body sensation that's underlying the behaviors and underlying the different like strategies you're utilizing. And so in line with that descriptiveness, it's just kind of shifting you from that thinking side of your brain over to the real experiential feeling side. And that's where you're able to do the deeper connection and the deeper healing, whether it's one-on-one, by yourself, or in a group.
And I was giggling as you were saying that, because again, being that I had been into treatment for my eating disorder, every treatment center has CBT groups and DBT groups, dialectical behavior and cognitive behavioral therapy groups. And I'm just going to be really transparent with you, Spence. I probably have been in at least 20 or 30 of these types of groups. And for the life of me, I could not even begin to tell you what they all mean, because they were they'd be talking and they'd be like, I'm not getting this stuff at all. This is like, forget it. This isn't doing a thing for me. And it's just me personally, doing classwork for cognitive behavioral disorders and dialectical. I don't get any of it. Excuse me. Get some water. I'm a word picture person.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I'm choking. You talk.
Yeah, actually, just what comes to mind from that is Alice Miller has a book called The Body Never Lies.
Mhm.
And she tells the story of like a woman in a similar treatment program as you're mentioning around like I think anorexia or some body dysmorphia.
Mhm.
And all these like teams of doctors like analyzing and taking notes and charting out treatment plans for her, and like her just closing herself off more and more to them. And then suddenly she starts to make all this progress, and the doctors are curious, and what they find out is that the maid or the whoever it was specifically, but the woman who was cleaning up or whatever would come into a room and she'd chit chat and she'd like really just listen to the woman, and they formed a connection, and that really allowed that woman to open back up and start to make change.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I am just grateful to get to know you, and the group that I jumped on with you.
Mm-hmm.
Please feel free to put that on my Facebook pages, because it was really a very nice group. And I'd just like the audience to know a little bit about how to reach out to Spencer. Here is his bio with his connections, how you can reach out to him. And this will be on the YouTube channel, so you can find him. And Spence, I just hope that you can join us again on Wednesday night. It was such a pleasure to get to know you more on Wednesday evenings. And I'm hoping that you can do some of your group exercises in that group too. I'd love for you to do that. And for the audience, sorry I'm chewing gum now, but my throat did something weird, and I don't know what it is. It just won't clear. If you're a leader and would love to be on the Braveheart Workshop podcast, please go to our contact page on braveheartworkshops.com. And if you'd like to join us on Wednesday evenings, please go again to the website and look for the tab that says podcast, so that you can get into that private Facebook group. So we hope you can join us on Wednesday nights. And Spence, I look forward to get to know you even more in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Everyone, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining the Connection Show. Bye now. Thanks for joining us on the Connection Show. Let's connect now. We can dream together to renew, restore, and reconnect with wellness in our life and community. To enhance connection, join us in the Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe on Wednesday evenings. The Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe is an easy and practical way for everyone to meet up, gather, and feel welcomed and accepted. To join us, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Then click on the podcast tab and the Zoom Connection Tribe tab. On that page, go to the Facebook page called the Connection Show Gathering Tribe and register to join our Facebook group. We post secure passwords each week in the group so you can log in safely. We meet on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for 1.5 hours with great topics, laughter, and connection. See you on Wednesday evenings. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.